I'd like to reconvene the City of Menasha Common Council meeting. Item P1 is the property acquisition of 100 Fox Street. This is part of the Loop the Lake Trestle Trail project. Director Tungate, could you tell us a little bit about this?
Sure, thank you. I just want to elaborate a little bit more on the memo that you all have. Back on January 12th, the Park Board and Plan Commission had a joint meeting, and part of what the action they took and ultimately the council took on February 1st was they wanted us to look at the east side of the the Matheson Street right-of-way, and that was where we focused our attention when we were looking at the trail down in that part of the city. So for the last couple months, we've been working with Grafe Engineering, kind of looking at different options. Some of you are probably familiar. There's an outfall structure, which is basically a concrete structure that's down off the end of that right of way, which is proven to be challenging. We looked at going to the downstream side of that outfall structure, which if you're standing at the right of way, that would be to the left. And we looked at going over the outfall structure, which proved to be quite challenging from an engineering standpoint, as well as Menasha sewage treatment plant wasn't crazy about the idea of putting the trail over their outfall structure. So then we started to again, after the Park Board Plan Commission, action, we really focused our attention to the east side of the outfall structure, which then brought into play, the vacant lot that was there. And the more we started to look at that and examine it and talk about it internally and talk about it, with our engineer and with the city of Neenah, we just thought it was in our best interest to look at a design that would incorporate that lot. And so Kevin Engelbert took this to the Plan Commission. The Park Board has also looked at it, but he took it to the Plan Commission. There's a couple of options that have been laid out. Just to give you an example, really, or a concept of what that layout would look like. It is not a final design. There was mention of a shelter and picnic tables. Those are, more or less placeholders. They may or may not end up in the final design, but we think there's several benefits to going that route. Before I get into some of the benefits, I also, we heard from Mr. Goes, who lives right across, really the street from that lot, and so we did reach out to him. He looked at the design. We felt he was, obviously the most critically impacted resident down in that area, and as you heard earlier, he's, maybe not in love with the idea, but he's, I think, much happier with that layout, moving it more to the east. So I guess from a benefit standpoint, obviously there's a parking lot there. There's a 7-car parking lot that's anticipated to go there, and I think there's a lot of support in general for having parking. We've heard from folks thinking that this is really going to be a pretty active trailhead. So we do have a small parking lot projected for that area. I would point out that we did do a count of the on-street parking available just in front of Shepherd Park, and you have roughly 58 on-street parking stalls available on just those two streets, Matheson and Fox Street in front of the park. So, the other nice thing about having the parking lot where it is, obviously the handicap accessibility is much better there. Mr. Goes pointed out the safety consideration. I think that is a valid point. Moving the trail to the east, having some separation there with the parking lot and some landscaping, really does, I think, reduce the pedestrian vehicle conflict. I think in general, residential backing is always an important thing. Probably don't have universal support of this going forward in this way, but I think we're in a much better place than we were, a couple months ago. then lastly, I wanted to talk about, I mentioned here, aesthetically pleasing. I really think this is in the best long-term interest for this Loop the Lake project. It's really going to provide for a much more pleasing public space that will have landscaping. There'll be a bench there. I mean, it's going to be there for it's going to be there forever. So and parkland along the river, I think is always a good thing. I think that sort of plays to our branding and our marketing theme that we've adopted. And so, I think there are many positives to go along with this. So I think Kevin will probably touch on more of the lot information and sort of the community development side of things. But I wanted to just kind of summarize things for you at this point.
Director Tungate, would you talk a little bit about the funding and kind of the two different areas that funding would come from for this?
So what we're anticipating doing here is we would utilize our Parkland Development Fund. I think it's a very good use of those dollars, and that's where we're expecting to take the money
for the purchase of the lot. But what about the amenities?
On the lot?
Yeah,
good. Yeah. Thank you for bringing that up. So that's the purchase of the lot. So all the trail, the parking, the benches, all that will be project expense. So that will be part of the overall project cost, the fundraising, the commitment by both communities. So that we've discussed that internally. So that's the plan going forward with that.
Did you want to add anything, Kevin?
Well, I just want to talk a little bit about the lot itself. As was mentioned, there was a house standing on this lot. It is a single-family residential lot. The house itself had fallen into significant disrepair a number of years ago, and in 2011 it was placarded by the Community Development Department, and subsequently a raise order was issued in 2013. Since then, the lot has been vacant, and currently, with our current zoning code requirements, they would preclude the construction of a new single-family house. This lot has 2 front yard setbacks. It has a side yard setback, and it is a fairly narrow lot. So in order to meet our garage ordinance standard in terms of having a 22-foot wide garage, it would be infeasible without a variance. Continuing along those lines, it would have significant issues in constructing a home on this property due to the 50-yard shore yard setback and the fact that it's in the floodplain. There would need to be some sort of filling, a 15-foot perimeter around a home in order to build a house there, and most likely a variance from the DNR would be required. In terms of this project, we have been informed by our engineers that we cannot go over that outfall structure, at least not with incurring a substantial amount of cost. That leaves 2 other options. One is going on the west side and disrupting somebody who is living there. The other option is going on the east side. Now, we know we need at least a little bit of land if we go on the east side, but my belief is acquiring the entire lot will be much more beneficial in terms of it will leave it won't leave a non-conforming lot, a lot that couldn't be built on, a sliver of a lot, etc.
So are there any questions, Alderman Benner?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Kevin, how would the wetland designation in this area affect construction of what is potential for this site?
In terms of what we plan to do with our project, or in terms of the house?
Typically when you have wetlands, you can't build anything in it, or even your plantings are very limited, things like that. But
so this actually isn't a wetland area; it is in the floodplain.
Or in the floodplain. I'm sorry.
Yes.
Okay, so how would that restrict any of the plantings or any of that?
It would not restrict any of the plantings. We'd have to pay attention to any of the hardscapes we put in there. There is an area of towards the back of the property, which would be the north, towards the shore, that's in the floodway, that would prohibit more structural uses on that end, but the rest of the property is in the general floodplain district, and I do not see a problem with putting benches or putting signs in that area, so long as they're placed above the regional flood elevation, which they will be.
Okay, thanks.
Kevin, who owns the lot?
Right now, the owner is a Laverne Williams, and we have been in negotiations with two of his daughters, which are also the power of attorneys. It's my understanding that Mr. Williams is in ill health right now and not able to negotiate for the property.
What is the condition of the lot? Is it
Right now, it's just a vacant lot. It's 50 feet wide by 100 and something deep, and it's just grass. There's nothing on it right now.
Whatever happened to running this trail behind the sewage plant? Did that just get dropped off, or what was the reasoning behind not running it there?
Well, part of the council action on, I think it was February 1st, actually gave me another month in order to get back to you with a feasibility study on that. And I can report that the Neenah Menasha sewage treatment plant is not crazy about putting the trail back there. Their minutes kind of say as much. Kevin and I did meet with them, and that information will be in this report that I give to you. But they, there's a lot of concerns back there. One of them being that there's a pinch point back there, meaning a real narrow area. And we actually went back there and measured it. It's less than 10 feet available between the riprap and the fence. I frankly didn't know it was that narrow until we put a tape measure to it. So, that's another concern in terms of putting the trail back there. There's the cost. And, if you want me to get into that a little bit more, I can. But this will be in this report that I will be giving to you within the next few weeks.
And, well, I went for a walk down there today because, for obvious reasons, some of you probably haven't even gone there yet. But why not Butamore Street? It's just an empty dead end right there, and there's no reason why we couldn't put it there. You don't have to buy property or anything. And why can't we put property in a parking lot in the park? Why is that because I don't ever see that park being used very much, and I think that would be a great thing for a parking lot to be there, because we're having troubles with vandalism and whatnot happening in that little bathroom area.
Well, I can tell you that the park board is on record as not being in favor of utilizing the park for a parking lot, and they do like this option much better.
What was the reasoning behind not using Butamore Street?
Is that the one downstream?
I have a picture if you want me to.
West
West of there. So that would have gotten into significantly more cost. We looked at the possibility of going from there, to James Island, or maybe, skirting around James Island and then back to where we need to connect to the trestle trail. I seem to recall you're at like 1,100 or so feet. You're not quite doubling, the length of the bridge, but pretty close.
I just don't see where we're going to get the funding eventually for this. Why can't we, even with this property acquisition, why can't we get the funding from the fundraiser that's going on for this Loop the Lake? Why can't we put this bit into it?
So that's a great question. I actually talked to Amy Barker, the executive director from Future Neenah, today with that exact question. And they have a sponsorship program that they're putting together, and that's to aid in the overall funding of the project. The city of Neenah has some real estate matters that they're dealing with too on their end, and so I guess we both feel like this is something that was not anticipated necessarily from the start, but that we're both going to address separately, really outside of the project. Number one, because it really wasn't put in the grant. There was no land acquisition really anticipated when the grant was submitted. And so, if future Nina, potentially can go above and beyond, their $1 million, they are open to the notion, at the end of the project, should there be, let's call it extra funds available, they're open to, having that discussion. However, there's going to be things, coming up like, okay, do we need to have an endowment to maintain these trails? I mean, there's probably, several other good uses, should there be any, let's call it extra money available for this project. And, and also we don't know if we haven't really bid the project out, we haven't gotten into things, there could be some cost overruns that we don't know of, so there's a lot of unanticipated, things that could come about, but that, future Nina really is not in a position to, come out and say, hey, we'll cover the cost of this.
What is Menasha's right of way next to 100 Fox Street? Why isn't there enough room just to run the trail there and not have to buy Fox Street and take that off the tax roll?
Well, so let me just touch on that a little bit. So if we were to try and align this landing with just staying on the right of way and not touching any of this lot, there would be a different bridge configuration, a different alignment that would be necessary, and from what our engineers are telling us, this would require longer spans, and fewer spans, but longer spans and more expensive spans. And along with that, you would have to go to a thicker girder because you have to, there's some pipes that are going on the bottom of the river, and you have to span those in the most safe and effective way possible. And so while it may be possible to engineer it that way, we are being told that it's going to be considerably higher than the cost of buying this lot. I can't give you a cost range or estimate, but it is, going to be, in the six-figure range of actually actually engineering this bridge in such a way to do it that way and just stay on the right of way and not use the lot.
Why do we give out variance? Why you say this is unbuildable, but we'll give a variance to anybody else if they want to build something, just like in my neighborhood. It's about the same size lot, and now we're going to decide we can't give them, we're going to put that out there. Someone could easily build on this lot. It's an asset of a lot. It's right on the water and everything. It's just kind of sad that we say it's our place on the water, and you're taking a lot off the water. That's all I have to say.
Alderman Collier?
Sometimes I say stuff wrong, so be ready. Loop the Lake is Loop the Lake, not through my neighborhood. I heard Mr. Knuth talk tonight. I've listened to other people in that district track me down and give me their side. I don't see anybody that parks in this parking zone getting to the bathroom in Shepherd Park if they're handicapped. So you're going to address that with another bathroom? And if the park department doesn't want to give up something, and what I would say is, you ain't going to make the 40 or 50 people there happy, no matter what you do. But the least you can do is maybe lose some park space, give them more parking so they don't feel so bad, and down the road, look at widening that road, even if it means more park space, so it's safer for the pavilions and the people riding down there and everything else, or else find a way to go out back on the lake before you do anything else, because it's Loop the Lake, not Loop my neighborhood, and I still don't know or have heard anything about the railroad. If they're even talking to you guys, or if you've talked to them supposedly once or twice, and I've never heard nothing again.
So does anyone want to comment about the railroad? If you would like to do that, Attorney Captain, or if Mr. Radke would like to? Looks like Mark's going to.
We have heard from the railroad. They have submitted to us a draft agreement for the crossing, and that's being reviewed by staff right now. So I can't tell you anything more than that, other than it's a lengthy agreement and it takes some time to review that. We recently received that.
I almost can't believe that we could do anything until we know what the railroad's doing. because that's a big part of the trail, the crossing, right? If they, are you telling me
Right.
they said yes? Are you,
No, yes, they are agreeing to providing us the crossing, but it comes with terms.
what's,
in the-
okay, before I would want to go forward, I want to know if I'm shutting down 2 more sections where you can't cross down in there, because if the trains are across there, now you just pissed them off with Loop the Lake coming through their yard. Now you're going to have trains blocking them off, and you might never get an ambulance or somebody back down in there.
Well, I
You don't
think
know, do
the
you?
project requires, I mean, we need that crossing on that north end.
Well,
At the-
if I live on that end and I got a 200-car train, and now I can't got no other crossings, and they decide to close a couple like they did in Neenah,
No, yeah, well, that's not part of their agreement.
well, I don't know. I haven't seen nothing. I'm always
Because-
going on speculation. I heard this. I don't see nothing in front of me. This changes, that changes. That's my argument. I mean, I want stuff to go, but then, I mean, you got to compensate these people in some way. And if I lose a little bit of park space to give them more parking so they got access through their driveways, 58 car parking tells me there's 58 times 4 people there with bikes. You know, I think you need another bathroom on the other side. You didn't think of that? And, you know, this whole Loop the Lake wasn't planned out the best. It belongs in front of the waste treatment plant. If it costs you another $1 million, you should have looked at that before you busted up. You don't want these people running in your neighborhood. You don't want the parking problem in your neighborhood. I don't want it in mine. Thank you.
Sure. Attorney Captain?
What I saw of the railroad agreement, all it is a use contract, so it just indicates that the city can use a certain area for certain purposes. Has indemnification language in it, of course, but it only pertains to use of that particular area that's described. That's all it's for. So it's basically a use permit. Has nothing to do with any other crossing or anything like that. That's not what it's about. You go to the railroad, you ask them if you could put something here in this location, and then they provide a use contract.
So they're not asking for closing of any other crossings as part of that contract.
So they're going to give us the right to cross it, and they're not asking for nothing.
At this point, no.
Well, that's what you gotta find out, because I know how, the
and-
railroads are bigger than everybody, and you don't get nothing for free.
So we'll be bringing back that agreement as well. Alderman Benner?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just 2 things. One, Alderman Zelinski commented that we wouldn't give a variance for building on this lot, and if I heard Kevin Engelberg correctly, he just said that based off what our zoning ordinance is, they could not build on this lot without a variance. He didn't say that we couldn't give them one, he's just saying that they couldn't do it without one.
Yeah, I understand.
So, yeah, you just mentioned that they couldn't build on this because they can't get a variance, and you mentioned that other people are getting variances, and I just wanted to clarify that. That was my understanding of what he had mentioned. The other thing is that really what we're looking for tonight, and again, the language I think is a little convoluted if my understanding is correct for what the recommendation is we're really not, what we're being asked to do here tonight is to not authorize a purchase of this lot that would still need to come back to us for approval. We're basically authorizing them to proceed to negotiate for this, correct, Mr. Mayor?
You could do it one of 2 ways. You could give a authorization to negotiate up to a certain amount and then bring it back, or you could give an authorization to purchase up to a certain amount.
Okay.
We would still need to bring this back for a budget adjustment because this wasn't a planned purchase as of November of last year. So they could both come back at the same time, the purchase and the budget adjustment at that point, and you could just give authorization to negotiate up to a certain amount.
Okay.
And we'd want to list that amount in the closed session portion.
Right, but anything that we would do here tonight would not give permission for them to go out and purchase it on behalf of the city. It still would need to come back to us, so, just so that was clear. And one other thing is, we did allude to the rerouting of the trail behind the wastewater treatment plant, and that really wouldn't have changed the location of that bridge. That's just the location of the trail to get to this point. So we're a little bit off topic on that. We're waiting for all your findings to come back on what that research was, and it really didn't have anything to do with the location of what this, of this lot, or where that crossing would happen.
And we still could go either direction on that. This doesn't preclude
Correct,
us going
right,
through
yep.
the park and along the waterfront or going down Lawson Street.
Yeah, but it wouldn't change where
No.
the effect of this lot, rerouting that trail if that were to happen.
No.
Okay. Thank you.
Is there any other discussion that people would like to have in open session? Seeing none, would anyone like to make a motion to adjourn into closed session? Alderman Benner?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. At this time, I'd like to make a motion to adjourn in a closed session pursuant to Wisconsin statutes 19.85, Parent 1, Parent E, deliberating or negotiating the purchasing of public properties and investing of public funds or conducting other specified public business whenever competitive or bargaining reasons require a closed session. This references the property acquisition of 100 Fox Street in Menasha.
Is there a second? Second. So motion and a second. Could we have a roll call vote, please?
Motion carried on roll call 7-0.
And we have to wait until he finalizes the tape here.
Broadcasts of the City of Menasha Administration Committee, Board of Public Works, and Common Council meetings are produced by University Studios of the University of Wisconsin-Fox Valley. Menasha residents and interested parties can obtain information about these meetings and meeting agendas from the city website, www.cityofmenasha-wi.gov. Expression of opinions regarding City of Menasha issues or about these broadcasts can be made by contacting the Mayor's Office, 920-967-5117. Contacting their city alderman. Contact information appears on the website. Completing the electronic feedback form on the website. All public portions of the meetings are recorded in entirety and are not edited for playback.